The three laws of perception. The first and the second and the third laws. In his first law of motion, Isaac Newton states that every object will remain at rest or in a uniform straight line motion unless it is compelled to change its state or direction by an external force. According to Newton, a collision or a massive force is the required event needed to compel an object to move in a different direction. The first law of perception is described by Newton's first law of motion. Your perception is the same as the object. You are rigid and firm in the beliefs you hold, unable to change your habits and thought patterns unless an external event literally shoves you into new perspective. Like the object, you too are unable to shift your own perceptions and take your life in a different direction. As human beings, we are unable to propel ourselves into new ways of thinking. We lack the ability to activate different thought patterns that lead to different outcomes in our lives, unless metaphorically thrust into new convictions by an external force. To this effect, I state the second law of perception. Travel or a traumatic event happening to you is the massive force required to change your perspective or the way you think. Typically, your outlook on life is most subject to change when you immerse yourself in cultures different from your own for an extended period, or when you go through extended periods of trauma or stress. By trauma, I am not just talking about the bad things. I'm also using it as a term to describe good life events that shift your perspective and change your perceptions. Getting married or having a baby could be examples of good trauma. Life thrusting you into a situation where you have to care for someone other than yourself can make you a responsible person. However, you may not have developed the caring and selfless qualities you now possess if the life event had not stepped in to be the change agent. Usually when people have a change in opinion, it is almost always predicated on traveling the world or a traumatic experience they had, like the loss of a loved one or a near-death experience. So if you knew for certain that you were going to die today, how would that insight change your perspective or life? Slow down and really think about this. What would be different about your current behavior and actions if your doctor told you that in just 24 hours you would die? Would your current perception or perspective still stand absolutely true? Would you still put off the calls you need to make and the relationships you need to heal? Trauma has a forceful way of removing the proverbial wool over your eyes in a way you cannot do for yourself. Think about the tough decisions you need to make in your life, but you do not have the balls to do it. You keep wishing that life will take responsibility for your own life and grant you a change agent. I wish human beings as a whole could create change for themselves and not need the push of an external force to shift frames. This means that our minds would be able to access different perspectives and pivot without the collision with travel or a traumatic event. Those who know me well will speak to my unbelievable sense of urgency. As it turns out, one of my many flaws in this life is looking so far into the future that I fail to see the present. Impatiently, I am the one who tells you on the 10th of the month that the month is over. In The Dark Knight with Christian Bale and Heath Ledger, the Joker had me laughing out loud when he leaned into Batman with the question, "Why so serious?" Funny enough, this same question has been asked of me many times before. In response, I point to one man whose actions seem to always defy the norm and explain how Steve Jobs believed death to be life's greatest invention. Knowing you will die is life's great change agent. You're already naked. There's no reason to not do what you want. There is so much content now for me in these words by Jobs because prior to the traumatic event I am going to talk about, I did not think this way. Growing up in Lagos, Nigeria was a grind. I grew up in a country with no electricity. Living, as you can imagine, is a hustle. When the power outage happens, we almost always must resort to candles and lanterns for light. Sometimes, the light will come back on in a few hours. Sometimes it took days. On this particular night, I ran out quickly around 9:30 p.m. to be first in line before the malam in the kiosk across the street sold out of candles. When I got past the protection of my compound gates, 5 men armed with guns grabbed me by the arm and shoved me back inside. These men were not wearing masks, which meant they were prepared to kill anyone who saw their faces, and I just did. As they ordered me back into the house, my subconscious mind took over and began to think through all the possible ways this experience could end. I particularly remember thinking to myself, oh shit, my brother is in the house. So to save him, I did what anyone trying to protect a loved one would do. I flat out refused to comply with the robbers. Clearly, my resistance angered one of the men as he hit me belligerently over the head with the bottom of his 9mm pistol. I passed out only to be woken up by the screams and threats to my brother to let them in, or they would kill me. He did. Taking the padlock off the sliding metal bars that guarded our home like a prison, my brother let the men in. Consumed with rage, we both sat and watched while they robbed us of our property and ate our food. What came next made about as much sense as it made no sense. This was Lagos, Nigeria, where human life often has no sanctity. My heart raced as they told me to lie face down on the floor, execution style. My brother sat against the wall where we had just been huddled together. With my face now planted against the concrete floor of our home, he was going to have to watch me die as he waited his turn. One of the men held his gun to the back of my head and ordered me to make my peace. In defiance, I pushed my head back against the barrel of his gun. Peace? You see, life slows down and speeds up rapidly when you're about to die. A second can feel more like a minute as you struggle to process the fact that in just a few moments you will no longer exist. My thoughts were clear but puzzling as I struggled to lock on his specific perception of peace. I know I felt fear and I felt anger. I also felt helplessness, but mostly I felt regret. If any such thing exists, I think your most authentic self probably shows up when you're about to die. In a traumatic moment that I thought was my final moment, my paradigm began to shift. You see, up to this moment, I had been a teenager passive with my life. I believed that I was here for a reason, that my existence meant something, and that I was special. I was young and I thought I had all the time in the world to figure out what that was. Well, at this point, one of two things had to be true. I either had no predetermined purpose, or it was my predetermined purpose to die this way. Either way, my life would have no impact on the world, at least not the way I'd pictured it in my mind. I would die here wretched, remembered only by the few family members left behind. Hell, even they would soon follow me to death soon enough. It would be like I had never existed. How could anyone attribute such pointless killing to God knows best? I thought to myself. I was going to be laid waste and become nothing but a spark of a memory. This traumatic event was the moment in my life when my perspective, passively going through life like a teenager, and my faith in God no longer made sense to me. From that experience, I developed a sense of urgency about the way I lived my life that I would never have had if my life had not had the collision with this event. I don't know that I could or would have forced myself into an urgent way of thinking had I not had this experience. This is where opportunity cost, or the third law of perception, begins to appear. My shift in frame happened in what felt like seconds, while the man with the gun behind me counted to 3. Then just before he pulled the trigger, the leader of the group stopped him with a dismissive gesture towards me. I was nothing. I was like everyone he had ever killed, but also no one he had ever killed. With my head still bleeding from being pistol whipped, I might as well have been dead. "Don't waste your bullets. Save 'em for a life that matter," he said. The bullet is worth more than his life. In that simple but dismissive gesture, he had given me life, but taken it at the same time. Hearing those words forced me to experience a second paradigm shift within the first paradigm shift I was already in. The reality in which I remained alive only existed because an armed robber had a perception that a bullet was worth more to him than I was. I was not even worth killing, and I had been saved because I was not worth anything. Confused and in tears, my anger turned into shame as I thought to infuriate the man to kill me now. Surely you see the irony here. He punished me the same way the gods punished Sisyphus. It was at this moment I knew I needed a new code to live by. I needed new perspective and interpretation. Believing absolutely in God no longer made sense to me. I had to clear and cleanse my mind of everything I knew to make way for a new system to live by. The extreme urgent, impatient person that my life is today is the outcome of that paradigm shift. that experience I had. The opportunity cost is forever wondering who I would have been, or for better or worse, how my life would have turned out had I never had that collision with that traumatic event. This is the third law of perception. You know the moment when who you are now began, but you still wonder who or what would have been had that moment never happened. For better or worse, I realized then that I would not be here tomorrow, and there are actions I must create for myself before death comes to take me. I got tired of rolling the rock up and down the hill. I could not wait to find my purpose anymore. I decided, fuck it. I'm going to create the damn thing for myself. I no longer believed in God has a purpose for me. I was going to create the thing myself. With gazelle-like focus, I learned about the world around me and how I was going to create my purpose in it. Success was going to be my revenge, and I saw everything as an opportunity. If you enjoyed this video, there is a lot more to come. I am reading ideas from my book in chronological order, so the next video awaits you right after this one.